On June 6, 1944, as the cold wind cut across the dark and restless waters of the English Channel, the United States moved toward a moment that would define its place in world history, because this was D-Day, the opening blow of Operation Overlord, a mission so risky that failure could have prolonged World War II for years and possibly change the balance of global power forever. Yet despite knowing the cost, thousands of American soldiers climbed into ships, planes, and landing craft with the understanding that by dawn many of them would be dead, because by 1944 Nazi Germany still controlled most of Western Europe, France had lived under occupation for 4 brutal years, and Adolf Hitler had transformed the coast of Normandy into a deadly fortress known as the Atlantic Wall, stretching mile after mile with reinforced concrete bunkers, steel obstacles, landmines buried beneath sand, artillery hidden in cliffs, and machine guns carefully positioned to cut down any attacker the moment they stepped onto the beach. And even among Allied commanders there was fear that no force on Earth could survive such defenses. Yet without a Western invasion the war could not be won, as Germany continued to pour its strength against the Soviet Union in the East, so the United States accepted the responsibility of leading the invasion, placing supreme command in the hands of Dwight D. Eisenhower, a man burdened by the knowledge that his single decision would determine the lives or deaths of tens of thousands, and as violent storms battered the channel and threatened to scatter ships and aircraft, Eisenhower faced the ultimate choice: delaying the invasion and risking exposure of the plan, or moving forward into chaos. And after long hours of tension he gave the simple but historic order to proceed, fully prepared to carry the blame if everything went wrong. And with that decision the invasion began in darkness, as American paratroopers leapt from aircraft into black skies filled with anti-aircraft fire, many landing far from their drop zones, some tangled in trees, others drowning in flooded fields weighed down by heavy gear, isolated and surrounded by enemy territory. Yet instead of surrendering or waiting for rescue, these men fought on in small groups, cutting telephone lines, destroying supply routes, ambushing German patrols, and holding bridges at all costs, knowing that every minute they delayed German reinforcements meant fewer Americans dying on the beaches, while offshore an armada unlike anything the world had ever seen pushed toward the coast, carrying thousands of young men packed shoulder to shoulder inside landing craft, listening to engines roar and shells explode nearby, some praying silently, others writing final letters in their minds, all of them staring at the metal doors in front of them, knowing that when those doors dropped, fate would decide everything. And nowhere was that fate more brutal than at Omaha Beach, where American forces faced the strongest German defenses, positioned high above narrow stretches of sand that offered almost no cover. And as the first wave hit the shore, machine gun fire ripped through the landing craft, artillery shells exploded among tightly packed soldiers, and entire units were destroyed within seconds, turning the shoreline into a scene of unimaginable horror as bodies floated in the surf. Wounded men cried out for help that could not reach them, equipment dragged soldiers beneath the waves where many drowned unseen, and command structures collapsed as officers were killed and radios shattered, creating chaos so complete that for a moment the invasion teetered on the edge of total failure. Yet in the midst of this nightmare something extraordinary happened, because instead of retreating, ordinary American soldiers made extraordinary choices. Small groups formed without orders, crawling forward under relentless fire, using shell craters as cover, scaling cliffs thought impossible to climb, hurling grenades into bunkers, silencing machine gun nests one by one, advancing not because victory seemed possible but because stopping meant death. And slowly, almost painfully, the impossible began to happen as gaps opened in the German defenses and momentum shifted, while at nearby Utah Beach American troops encountered lighter resistance and pushed inland more quickly, securing vital ground that allowed reinforcements, tanks, and supplies to flow into France, strengthening the entire invasion. And by the end of that single day, despite suffering thousands of casualties, the United States and its allies had achieved what many believed could never be done: establishing a permanent foothold in Nazi-occupied Europe, forcing Hitler's army to confront a massive Allied force in the West while still locked in a deadly struggle in the East. And from that moment forward Germany's defeat became inevitable. Yet D-Day was far more than lines moving on a map or a strategic success measured in territory gained. It was a human story written in fear, courage, sacrifice, and loss, told through the lives of American soldiers who charged into gunfire knowing their chances were slim, medics who ran across open sand to save strangers, paratroopers who fought alone in enemy territory with no idea if help would ever arrive, and families back home who would soon receive telegrams instead instead of reunions, making D-Day a symbol not just of military power but of the terrible price paid for freedom, because on June 6, 1944, the United States proved that it was willing to bleed, endure, and sacrifice on a massive scale to destroy tyranny, and the echoes of that day would roll forward through the liberation of France, the fall of Nazi Germany, and the shaping of the modern world, ensuring that the storming of Normandy would forever stand as the moment America helped turn the tide of history and change the course of World War II forever.